What is good? So, I wanted to make a video about a book that I thought was really, really good. It is a book by Fyodor Dostoevsky, so a man that was from Russia, and he was deeply Orthodox, so he's an Orthodox Christian. And like the whole Eastern tradition and everything over there is very much reflected in his work, especially in the book called The Idiot. But I'm going to focus today on the book called Crime and Punishment. So, Crime and Punishment is a very interesting book. It brings up a lot of different topics. Um, I'll just start with the book summary. So there's a man, Raskolnikov, and his parents gave him all kinds of money to go to college. He squandered the money, never really went to college. He thought he was above college. He thought he was above his professors. He thought he was so smart, the smartest man on campus, smarter than all the professors who spent years and years and years perfecting their craft. So he squanders all of his money. He has no money, and the parents now are broke. So his parents are actually marrying off their daughter, aka Raskolnikov's sister, to this man who is not a good man. He's like a scoundrel, but he has money, and they don't want to marry her off to him, but they think it's the only way they can recuperate the money. So Raskolnikov, basically to get like rent money, he ended up borrowing money from the pawnbroker. So the borrowed money that he took, he squandered that as well, so then he has to keep borrowing money, and it's a debt that he doesn't think he'll ever pay off. So instead of actually just working hard, putting your head down, just going for what you have to go for and paying off your debt and being debt free, he decides instead to go to the bar and drink and be around all these other people that were talking bad about the pawnbroker. And anyways, he ended up going to the pawnbroker's house thinking that he's smarter than everybody. He's thinking that he can get away with crime and murder and everything because he's so smart, according to himself, which is what? Pride. And what was the very first sin in the Bible? The very first sin in the Bible in Genesis was Adam and Eve, and it was pride. They thought that they were above God or at the same level of God. They thought they could maybe trick God. And God said, do everything except for eat from this one tree. Don't eat the fruit of the one tree. And that is the fruit and the knowledge of good and evil. And the book basically reflects that, as you'll see later on. Anyways, he goes to the pawnbroker's house, being all full of pride, thinking he can get away with murder. He goes and murders the pawnbroker. At the same time as the murder with an axe, next thing you know, the pawnbroker's sister comes in. And when she comes in, it catches Raskolnikov by surprise, and he only intended to murder just the pawnbroker. He ended up doing a double murder. And that set him up for the whole rest of the story. And this book, it starts off very, very strong. It starts off basically with him saying that he's pretty much the smartest man in the city. He's the smartest man and all this stuff, all this pride, basically. And the first 100 pages, all of this happens. So it tells you who did the crime. It's not a murder mystery. You know exactly who did it. You know exactly why he did it. The rest of the story follows the psychological guilt that he has. And there's a lot of reasons for that I'll get into later. But as the book continues, he is high off of adrenaline, and he feels like he did such a great thing that now he doesn't owe anybody anything, and that now he's debt-free based on that. All of the other people that owed money to the pawnbroker, they're all debt-free now based on that. And he thinks it's a great thing just on the high of the adrenaline. Well, the very next day, he realizes that maybe it's not such a great idea to do that. And going forward, he just feels guilt, more and more pressure and more guilt as the time goes on. So even if you can fool the government or fool the police or whatever it is, you can never fool your consciousness. You can never fool your spirit, you know? And basically, he keeps going on this path of, you know, he did the perfect murder, so to speak. He never got caught. The law never found out who it was. And he got away with it. But he didn't really get away with it. He was still left with the guilt. He still was having flashbacks of the moment that he hurt them. He's thinking about how the family's affected. He's seen the funeral passing by. He's seen people talking about it on the news. Everywhere he goes, he's reminded of it. And he can never get that out of his consciousness, that he did that awful thing. Even though he thought it was a great thing at the time, he still could never get past that. Even if it was the morally good thing to do. And I'm putting all this in quotations because obviously it wasn't the morally good thing to do. But, you know, oh, all these people will be debt-free and will be out of debt and nobody will owe anything to anybody. But is it really worth it? It's not. It's not worth it. Obviously not. I mean, that's crazy. But the book, it just continues to go on, and it goes really, really deep. And he eventually finds a woman named Sonia, and feeling all of this guilt built up in him from the original pride that he had, he ended up confessing to Sonia what had happened. Now, Sonia in the story was pretty religious. She was living a bad life as far as her occupation. But she was doing that to try to help her family, but she was still trying to stay connected to her religion. She told him to go kiss the ground and go basically pray to God and connect back with God and to turn himself in. There was another guy, Porphyry. Porphyry was the detective essentially on this case. Now, there's a lot of argument for which way it goes, but a lot of people seem to think that Porphyry knew that he did it, but he didn't want to out him immediately. He wanted him to come forward himself, as he'd feel better about himself for it, and then that way he can kind of reconcile himself, reconcile everything that happened, and work out salvation with God. Other people don't think that he knew about that the detective had no idea who did it, and he just happened to be in the picture, which also could be true, and it was just kind of more pressure around of people who didn't know what happened, but he knew, and he's the only one that knew. Even though it was the perfect crime and that it helped so many people, he still felt bad about it. So this kind of echoes back to Nietzsche, in a sense. So his whole idea of the Übermensch, where basically Nietzsche was trying to say that man basically is his own god, and that man can decide what's good and what's bad, and that's just not true. I mean, we've seen that in Adam and Eve, obviously. But Dostoevsky actually wrote this book and got to Nietzsche's conclusion before Nietzsche even got to his own conclusion. So Nietzsche was in his early stages of writing the Übermensch when Dostoevsky heard about this, and Dostoevsky published this book and figured out what his conclusion was going to be before he even got to it. That's how great Dostoevsky was as a writer, as a psychologist, a philosopher. Dostoevsky's amazing. It's insane. But basically, he thinks that morality is subjective. So if somebody says something or does something over here, well, in that society, it's okay. But then if they do something different in a different society, well, then that one's also okay. It's just different. And it's all subjective. That's the thought that Raskolnikov had originally. But as time goes on, he proves that that's just not true, that there is objective morality, that God gives us morality. It's all prescribed right there in the Bible itself. But it's basically that God is the one that gives us morals, and we're all accountable to him. No matter how much we think we're great, no matter how big we think we are, how much money we have, how much power we have, at the end of the day, God is the most powerful. He is the most powerful. So this book really echoes back to that. And it's really, really interesting. So it's talking about even if he got away with it, even if the law said that they couldn't catch him, but even if the law said it was okay and morally allowed, even if it's for the greater good, he still didn't feel good about it. There's no way to make yourself feel good about doing something like that. This book is really, really deep. It goes to some really dark places. There was a whole part where he was having nightmares. He was having like fainting spells, essentially, and he was having nightmares, and he couldn't shake it. So at the end of the book, after Sonia told him to do that and to confess, he finally confessed, and Porphyry didn't seem that shocked. I mean, at first he was almost making a joke about it. He's like, oh, of course you're the one who did it. Oh, yeah. And then he's like, no, of course you'd never be the one to do it. What are you even talking about? Are you lying to me? Are you trying to make a joke? But at the end of it, Porphyry really didn't seem that shocked. He made a couple jokes here and there, a couple little, like, odd tensions in between. But at the end of the story, to me, it seemed like Porphyry knew the whole time, in my opinion. But that's just my opinion. Other people don't agree with that necessarily. That's okay. But at the end of the story, he finally turned himself in. They said that he was going to go work in Siberia for a number of years to pay off basically everything that he did. That was his jail sentence, essentially, to go to Siberia, do hard labor. And he never was more grateful for that. No matter how much his psyche and his intellectualism, if he even was one, but his supposed intellectualism, no matter how much and how highly he thought of himself and of the act and how much morally good it did and all this nonsense, he never could shake it. He never could. He had to have somebody come through and be salvation for him, to save him from himself, to save him from his psyche, his consciousness, and to save him from the act that he did. So even if a country said that it was perfectly allowed and legal and it's okay to do X, Y, or Z, it still doesn't make it okay. It's not subjective in that sense. Morality is very much objective. And this whole story just echoed that perfectly, in my opinion. It was just great. I really, really liked this story. It was a great story. It was, honest to goodness, one of the toughest reads I've ever read. One of the toughest books. It was the psychologically toughest book I've ever read. It was a really, really tough book in that sense. I actually read about half of the book, and then I took, I think it was like a year and 2 months. I think it was around 14 months total of a break in between reading the first half and the second half of the book, just because it became a lot psychologically to read. So I read a couple books in between here and there. But I finished the book later on, and I really, really loved the book. It was a fantastic book. And it really does show that objective morality, that there is a higher consciousness, and that higher consciousness has a name. It's God. It's Yeshua. It's Jesus. It's Elohim. And God is that higher consciousness. He is. And He's with all of us all of the time. So we need to look to Him, and we need to look to the Holy Spirit, that if you've been baptized, and if you believe in God, and believe in Jesus, and believe in the Holy Spirit, that dwells within you, and to consult the Holy Spirit as well. But this book, it was amazing. It goes from Raskolnikov at the very beginning, thinking so highly of himself, having so much pride, going from that to actually doing the action that he kept thinking about doing, and to feeling terrible about himself, absolutely horrible. He went from loving himself so much and being so prideful, thinking he was better than everybody, to being at the very bottom of the pit, the very, very lowest of the low that you could possibly be. And it just goes to show, pride will lead you there every single time. Every single time. I mean, the first sin of the Bible, what was the first and the biggest sin of the devil? It was pride. He thought he was God. He thought that he could rule heaven. He thought that he was higher than God, or at least at the same level of God. And he is not. Absolutely not. And now, ironically, he is at the lowest possible level, not even close to God. He is the lowest possible level. So it just goes to show that wherever there is pride, there is inherent destruction. And that comes from Proverbs, I do believe. But right before or right after pride is destruction, every single time. But overall, this was a fantastic book by Dostoevsky. This is my first book review on the channel, and I hope that everyone enjoyed it. And if you didn't, well, find another book review video, I suppose. But I really liked the book. I thought it was really, really good. And I really like Dostoevsky's work. I've read quite a lot by him. I haven't read every single thing, but I've read The Double. That was my first book that I read by him. That was a pretty okay book. Crime and Punishment. The Idiot. Right now I'm reading a short story, so I actually just read White Nights, and I'm reading right now Mr. Proharchin, I think is how you say his name, and I'm trying to think, Notes from the Underground. I also read that one, and that was a really good book too, so I might make videos on that in the future, book reviews. We'll see how it goes. But I really liked the book The Idiot. I didn't like a lot of it at the beginning, but as time went on, probably 70% into it, I thought it was a fantastic read. But yeah, Crime and Punishment, that's another thing too, is Raskolnikov. The Raskolnikov he was before the incident, and the Raskolnikov that he was after the incident are two completely different people. And it just goes to show that pride can and will change you, and not for the better. And that taking these actions, even if you think that you're the Ubermensch, even if you think you are the highest of the high, and you're smarter than everybody else, and you think you just have such an ego essentially attached to you, an ego, a pride, a sense of haughtiness, it is never going to really work out well for you. You know, I mean, God says to be humble. God raises up those who are humble. God sets down those who are prideful. So, the Raskolnikov before and the Raskolnikov after, two completely different people. Very, very different people. You know, Raskolnikov didn't have any of this guilt. He actually had a higher sense of self, too much so. But he went from that to just thinking he was the lowest of the low, and his own self would haunt him. Just seeing himself in the mirror, he literally could not look himself in the mirror. And it just goes to show that you can't have any pride. You can't. You have to be humble. And that God is the one who creates all of morality, and you have to follow God's legal code and God's moral code. That's what it all is about. I hope you liked the review. I'll see you guys in the next one.